Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me in this session where we are going to be speaking about the in-house fraud investigation team's 2025 benchmarking report published by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, where we are going to be speaking about how you as fraud examiner working in a fraud department need to think about your team, your work, your workload, your education, your position, the cases that you handle. So this is a very interesting comprehensive report that can be useful for you if you are working in the fraud investigation team, or if you are working as audit committee, internal auditor, board of director, to advise your board of director and audit committee and fraud team about what are the best practices in having proper investigation team and what is happening currently in the industry. The good thing about having a benchmarking report will help you understand what other organizations in different industries are doing and how we can see the shift between what happened in 4 or 5 years ago before COVID and between today. We can see so many changes, right? After COVID, so many organizations decided to have investigators working remotely. They decided to go and have different teams operated in different geographical locations rather than in the head office. We can see the different type of investigation cases that happen. We can see today we have more cases related to cryptocurrency, more related to cybersecurity issues. We can see corruption is going higher because there are so many cases involve corruption. So this is a very interesting comprehensive report that is going to highlight this issue. And definitely I would like to hear from you because you are working in that industry. So you can write in the comment what do you think about each one of these questions that we are going to ask, and we are going to see our colleagues who are working in the fraud investigation what they answer related to these questions. So let's start with the first one, which is very interesting. We can see inside our organization that when we are looking at fraud examiners, we can see in most of the organization, on average, we have around one fraud examiner to around 330 employees. This is if you want to say it by one. But we can see we have 3 fraud examiners for 1,000 employees. So you need to think about it in your organization. Go back to your organization. How many employees you have and how many on average we have our investigation team operating. But if we take it and break it down into different types of organization, we look at small organization. We can see small organization, for each 100 employees, they have around 8. We can see, how many investigators we have for the organization between 10 and 900. They have around 12 investigators. On average, we are speaking. Here, for organization who are between 1,000 and 10,000, they have around 32. And for larger organization, definitely big multinational organization, their investigation team average around 86. So it's interesting to see that the larger the organizational size, the larger the investigation team, which is of course required because definitely they are going to have more fraud cases and they are going to have more operation. Now, when we are speaking about the credential that fraud examiners should have when they are actually performing their job, we can look at it and emphasize more that the CFE, Certified Fraud Examiner, is the golden standard when it comes to any individual operating on the investigation team. See, maybe he's not necessarily part of the investigation department, but if you are operating in the investigation team, you should have a certificate that can give you the knowledge and skills for you to perform your job. And I'm really privileged to work with the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners for the last 12 years, delivering the CFE exam review course, where we have more than 4,000 anti-fraud professionals. They were able to graduate with our program and earn the certificate. So I encourage you all, if you're still thinking about having the certificate, you can join our classes. We conduct them virtually. You can join from anywhere in the world, or we conduct them in person in the GCC and Malaysia, where you can attend our classes and pass the exam and earn the gold standard. But what other certificates that these individuals usually they have? They can have the CFE, this is number one, around 47%, but we can see also they have the CPA, they can have the CIA. This is why so many of my friends who are working internal audit, they say, yeah, I earned the CIA, should I earn the CFE as well? I say, of course, CIA is focusing on internal audit, it's good, to help you in understanding certain areas related to fraud investigation, but earning the CFE definitely will be much better if you are handling areas related to fraud investigation. Maybe individuals that are handling areas related to money laundering, they can have different certification related to money laundering or information security, or they are handling issues related to financial crime, or handling issues related to accounting. So there are different certificates that these individuals are working in the investigation team they can have to be able to help them perform their job much better. Now let's speak about the number of years. The number of years that these individuals are working in internal investigation team, they have around 10 years, 10.9 years. It's very important for you as a professional working in the fraud examination to have enough years of experience to understand how you are performing your job. But this also will indicate that inside our investigation team, we have high retention rate. The meaning once an individual joins an investigation team, he is gonna stay in that industry for a long period of time. And we can see that organizations, when they usually hire someone working in the, for their investigation team, they are hiring individuals where they have so many years of experience. So when we look at it and break it down, we can see based on the industries, we have in the health and care, usually they have on average around 18 years of experience. We can see, you know, in energy, in services, they have 17 years of experience. We can see in the food services, these are the average level of experience that investigators by industry they have. We can see that in real estate around 14, utility, education. We can look at the technology, look at manufacturing, look at, you know, wholesale, and we can see that the least number of years are the art, entertainment, and recreation and mining. Number of years of experience is important indication that help us understand the industry that we are in. So in that way, when we are dealing with cases related to fraud, we will be able to figure out how can we uncover them much better. Now let's speak about, you know, you as a fraud examiner, are you working locally in the head office operating, or you are working in a remote office? Are you actually working from the head office in person, or you are operating from your home remotely, or you have a hybrid approach? It's very important to understand today because of the way we operate as an organization. If we have a small organization, 70 employees, most likely the fraud examiner will be operating from the head office. He will be operating in the same location as this organization. But if we have multinational organization, should we have the investigation team in the head office only? Or should we have an investigation team spread between all the offices, all the countries? They say 41% of the fraud investigation team, they are geographically spread between different locations. So let's look at the details. They say, how are fraud investigation teams geographically dispersed? We can see, they say 59% of them, the entire team located in close proximity to the company. Most likely this is for small offices, for small organizations. But for other organizations, we can see that they are spread between different locations in one country, or they are even spread between different locations within the region. And this is a much better approach. The more your investigator is closer to the operation, understanding what's going on, closer to the area where the fraud happened, the more he will help in the investigation. Doing fraud remotely, it can have an advantage, but having someone on the ground much better to handle these cases. And we can see in some situation, you know, the investigators, they are spread all over the world. This is for multinational organizations. They have different offices, they are operating in different languages, and even they hire fraud investigators who can handle different type of culture in that country. Now let's look at our investigators team remotely operating, or they are operating in a hybrid or in the office. This is a very interesting to see that, look at this, 43% all investigation team are operating in a hybrid approach. So we can see today, especially after COVID, that so many organizations decided to say, no, we are not gonna make you all operate from the office. You can operate in a hybrid approach, especially if you are gonna operate remotely in a different location. You have different investigation that you need to handle. So operating remotely is an interesting way to look at it. So you can operate remotely. Also, let's see exactly when we are speaking about who's working from the office. We can see all investigation team are operating remotely, 9%. 9% of them, they are operating remotely. 12% of them, they are operating in different mode. But 36% they are operating in the office. And this is really interesting. We can still see that some individuals are still operating in the office. They have to come and have a full time coming to the office and operate. So it again depends on the organizational style, the organizational culture, how you are gonna divide your team between who is gonna come to work, who is gonna stay home, and who is gonna be in between. Another thing which is interesting, they say 26% of fraud investigation team report directly to the CEO, which is maybe not the right approach. Because you as a fraud investigation team, you need to have functional reporting to who? To the board of directors, to audit committee, to someone independent. But unfortunately, in small organization, usually the fraud investigation team will report to the CEO or to senior management. When we look at it in general, we can see in general to whom does the fraud investigation team reports. We can see like the survey said 26% reporting to the CEO or senior management. But number two, which is good, 19% they report to the board of directors and audit committee, which is the right approach. Or they report to the head of internal audit. Maybe sometimes some organization, they have the investigation team operating under the internal audit and the internal audit reporting to board of directors. Okay, or they can report to head of compliance. Some organization, they have the investigation operating under compliance. Or they're reporting to the head of risk management. I don't really like that. Reporting to the in-house legal counsel, see? Or reporting to the head of global investigation if they have different investigation team all over the world. Yes, that can be an approach. In some retailers, because they don't call it fraud department, they call it a head of loss prevention. Any fraud cases, the investigation team, they need to report to the loss prevention. Or the head of finance if it's related to financial fraud, but also I don't like it because most likely someone in the finance department may be involved in the fraud. So they should be reporting actually to the board of directors audit committee. So that's the much better approach inside our organization to have. Now let's speak about how can we look at it from different industry based on different operation. If your organization is small, usually look, if your organization is small, 42% report to the CEO directly. But the interesting thing, the minute we can see your organization is between 100 to 99 employees or between 1,000 to 10,000 employees, we can see that actually we are reporting to who? We are reporting to board of directors. We are reporting to the head of internal audit. The head of internal audit will move higher when we go even to bigger organization. If organization they have more than 10,000 employees, internal auditors are playing more critical role. So they are handling areas related to the investigation and they are getting the reports. So we can see that based on the size of your organization, also based on the industry, different industries, like I say, if you are speaking about retailers, they like what? They like issue to be reported to loss and prevention. Now, when we look at different industry, we can see exactly who is getting which report. We can see, for example, when we look at education, 55% of the cases are reported to Board of Directors and Audit Committee because Board of Directors and Audit Committee, they have more fiduciary role, especially in the education industry. We can see in real estate, it's usually reported to the head of internal audit. We can see in other industry, is usually reported to the CEO and Board of Directors. In some industries, it's actually reported to the head of loss prevention, like we said, because this is more related to food, hospitality, entertainment. So in that way, different industry will handle the reporting process differently. Now let's speak about how are we gonna have you as in fraud investigation doing your work. What kind of workload you should have? They say the first question, how frequently do investigation team investigate different type of cases? What type of cases are we investigating inside our organization? Is it related to financial fraud? Is it related to corruption? Is it related to financial statement fraud? Well, the answer is no. Why? Because remember, these are big cases and they are not going to happen every day. Every day cases are going to happen is going to be embezzlement, It's gonna be someone misappropriating asset. It's gonna be someone doing fraud as a customer or as a vendor. These are the cases that usually will come to us, to our attention. So we can see here that most of the cases that we handle inside our fraud investigation team, they are related to employee embezzlement, related to fraud committed by customers, related to fraud committed by the vendor, related to corruption, bribery cases, HR issues that came to our attention. Someone actually violated the HR policy. He accepted a gift from the vendor he should not accept. See, this is not actually, he didn't do corruption, he didn't do anything. He just accepted a gift that didn't influence his decision, but he violated the HR policy. We have issues related to cyber fraud, hacking. Then we have financial statement fraud, money laundering. So because these cases are not happening often, but usually, if you want to ask anyone working in the fraud department, they say these are the significant cases. These are the cases where usually the fraud in billions, not millions, billions of dollars. And these are the cases that we need to really pay attention to, because the other cases are important, but at the same time, we need to look at the significant, not the number of the cases. Another thing, when we look at the cases that we have, how many times do the team devote time to their fraud investigation? This is interesting to understand the workload of the fraud investigation team. Are they focusing on the fraud investigation cases, or they have other responsibilities that they need to handle? So they say usually the team is focusing on what? They say 32%, they are devoting 70 to 100% of their time to the fraud cases, which is good. Fraud investigation team, they should devote their time to the fraud investigation case. But why? We can see here the 30% they devote only 0 to 20%, 25, because maybe they are part of the investigation team, but they are working in finance. They are working in internal audit. They are only help the investigation team in doing their job. Remember, we are not speaking about the investigation department. We are not speaking about you as a fraud examiner working in the investigation department. We are speaking about the investigating team. The investigation team can have someone from finance, accounting, HR, legal. So maybe they can devote all their time to the fraud investigation. But you, working in the fraud department, definitely you are going to be devoting your time 100% or 90% for that fraud case. They say 50% of fraud investigators have average of load around 5 cases, which is really interesting. So in that way, if you remember, you are working in fraud cases. Go back and see currently how many cases you have on average. You have around 5, you have around 10. I remember when I was working and doing fraud cases, sometimes I have 20. This case is about to close. This case is about to start. This case we progress. This case is on hold. So sometimes we have so many fraud cases that we handle at the same time. When we look at it and we see how many cases on average a fraud examiner they handle at a given time, they say around 50% of them, they say it's around 5 cases. But some of them, they say, 18% they say between 5 to 9 cases. And 14% they said also around 10 to 19 cases. 16% they say around 20 to 99. And 2% they say more than 100. That's too much. More than 100 cases handling at the same time. But I know in multinational organizations, usually they have so many cases. So sometimes you can be involved in so many of them. But we need to understand how much load we need to add to, because remember, you can have 1 case, 2 cases, 10 cases, 20 cases. After that, how are you going to be working effectively to handle all this workload? Now let's understand, how does average case load per fraud examiner per industry at one time? So usually per industry at one time, how many fraud investigation currently open? This is what they are saying. How many cases currently we have open per industry? They say in religious, charitable, and social services, they have around 24 cases. Usually they will be small cases, not so much. Healthcare, yes, of course, healthcare, they can have some cases. Mining, banking, of course. 19 is even a low number. Usually banking, they have so many cases at one time. See, they are not saying per year, they're saying at one time. How many cases they have currently dealing with. Utility, telecom, technology, they have around 15%, insurance around 14%. We can see down in the bottom, manufacturing 5% and real estate 5%. So why this benchmarking report is important? Look at your industry and go back and say currently, based on this, how many cases are we handling? Are we more or less than the benchmark report? Another thing we need to address, that 51% of fraud investigation team close their cases within 30 days. We're not saying you should close your case within 30 days, but we are saying on average, 50% of the teams who are handling the cases, they are closing the cases within 30 days. Of course, it depends on the case. If it's a small case, maybe you can close it shorter. If it's a larger case, it's going to take more time. But this is actually what is the time required to close a case? No. They say some individuals, they are going to take more, they are going to take less. But we can see that fraud examiners over time, they are taking longer to close their cases. Look at this. They compare between 2019 and 2024. In 2019, for cases less than 30 days, it was taking us more. Now it's taking us less. But for cases more than 30 days, and now we have more of these cases that we are handling. So these cases, it's going to take us more time to close them. Why? Because they are more complicated cases. If they are more complicated cases, of course, it's going to take us time. But of course, if we are using AI, if we are using technology, this should help us in reducing the time for us to analyze the case and close it, in writing our fraud investigation report, in examining the evidence. So the question here for your team, what can you do to reduce the time of handling this case from the minute you start the investigation until you finish? When we look at how many days on average it will take you to close a case, they say, sometimes for small cases, it will take us around 14 days or less. For normal cases, around, it will take us around 15 to 30 days. But for more complicated cases, they say 22% of our cases, it will take us around 31 to 60 days. Some of our cases will take us even more than 120 days. So these are interesting, but we can't use them as benchmark for you. Why? Because it depends on the case. If it's a small case, of course, it's going to be maybe quickly. If it's a big case, it's going to take time. But it's an interesting thing to take a look at. Now, let's speak about how does time to close the case vary per industry. For each industry, how long they are taking for them to close each case. They say for services industry, it's taking them long time to close the case. You can see, remember the last time you went to a service industry and you file a complaint related to a fraud case. It will take time until they get the facts, until they close it. Yes. We look at government. Government also, it will take time because there's a bureaucracy in the process, right? Also, healthcare, it will take time. Education will take time. But we can see which one is really quickly in closing the cases. Technology, banking industry, retail. So these are quickly trying to what? Trying to close the cases. Why? Because they are having critical issue. They want to understand the issue. They want to figure out what happened. They want to take it proper action. So in that way, they are taking more time. They are doing more work to close the case faster. Now let's speak about what is the typical outcome of fraud case. If we have a fraud case, at the end, what type of action the organization is taking related to this fraud case? Well, they have different types of action. It can be, if the evidence sustained, they can prove the case, or they can have the result will be a disciplinary action. They take an action against the individual. It may be they will terminate the person. Maybe they will give him a warning. Maybe they will take some kind of action internally against him. Or they can result of civil litigation. They can take a civil case against the person. Or it can be referred for prosecution. They will take actually criminal case against him. So it depends on different types of investigation. But we can see that most of the cases, they are actually taking civil cases against them and they are taking disciplinary action. In most of the cases, they are taking action against individuals who are doing fraud. So in that way, only small number of cases that actually no action has been taken, which is good because we want to send the signal and the message inside our organization that if you are going to do fraud, we are going to take action against you. But not only action, we are going to file case against you. We are going to terminate you. And maybe we are going to even take a criminal case against you if it's required. This is an interesting survey to tell you that most of organizations, they recover only 25% of the fraud losses. Only 25%. So the meaning, when you are doing the investigation, you need to give in advance the board of director, audit committee, telling them, no, we are not going to recover everything. Based on the ACFE benchmarking report, most of the organizations, they recover only 25%. So we are trying to do better. But what other organizations doing? They say 17%, they recover nothing. 41% they recover between 1 to 25%, and 20% they recover between 26 to 50%, and 11% of the cases we recover 51 to 75, and the lucky cases, 11% of the cases we recover 75, 76 to everything approximately, which is a good way to take a look at it. Only short percentage, only like if you go to board of director, only around 11% we are recovering most of our assets. But in so many cases, we can't recover most of the losses. So by having the expectation of audit committee and board of director in the beginning of the investigation will not be shock for them later when you give them the report and say, sorry, we only recovered 50%. 50% is a good based on the survey. Another question which is very important for us to understand, what about the size of our investigation team? It was increase or decrease over the last 5 years. We can see that over the 5 years, of course, the size of the team increased because the number of fraud cases increased, because of fraud globally increased. Today, we are living in the golden age of fraud. Fraudsters are doing more fraud, and fraud is happening today more externally than internally. We can see customers are doing fraud, hackers are doing fraud, competitors are doing fraud, vendors are doing fraud against us. So there are so many individuals who are trying to take advantage of our operation. So we can see the size of our organizations actually went up from 24.8 usually for the organization to around 37. But the question here, what type of cases we are handling today? They say most of the cases we are handling today inside our organization are related to corruption and bribery. Why? Based on the ACFE report to the nation, we can see that corruption represents 50% of the fraud cases that we have. So if we have cases related to asset misappropriation or cases related to financial statement fraud, most likely they're going to be a case related to corruption. And corruption is the core, is the main reason why fraud is happening. Because if you don't have the proper culture inside your organization, someone is going to take advantage of his position and is going to do fraud at the end. So this is why we can see between 2019 and 2024, the number of cases related to corruption and bribery increased. And this is why we can see that so many governments, so many organizations, they focus on we need to create the proper culture. We need to have the proper regulations related to corruption and bribery to ensure that is not happening, because this is the core, the reason why fraud happening inside our organization. Now, this is an interesting question. How are fraud investigation team evaluated at the end? How board of directors, how the audit committee, how the fraud committee deciding at the end of the year, oh, you did a good job or you are not performing well. Let's see what organization said. They say number of cases you close per year. I don't know, is this a good measure? You tell me, you're not in the, is this a good measure? This year we closed 700 cases. If we close 700 cases this year, that doesn't mean good. They mean we have 700 fraud cases. So it's not about how many cases we close. Or this year we close only 30 cases. Only 30 cases? Yeah, we have no fraud cases. So I don't know if it's a really effective way to say how many fraud cases we closed. Out of the fraud cases we have, maybe, yes. But it's not even effective. This year we had 100 fraud cases, we closed 30. So the meaning 70 is still outstanding. Yes, that can show you, okay, there are so many fraud cases, but maybe it's not our fault. Maybe we don't have the evidence. Maybe we have so many fraud cases, our fraud team is small. So always, this is not a good measure to measure the fraud investigation team by saying, how many fraud cases you close, how many fraud cases still open. This is one of the measures to say, how can we improve? Do we need to expand our team? Do we need to buy technology? Do we need to automate our process? Do we need to outsource some of the investigation? But number one, this is what most of organizations are using. Number two, the amount of losses prevented or avoided. This is really interesting. Usually, investigation will happen after fraud. So how they are evaluating the fraud investigation team based on how much money or losses we have prevented or avoided, because this is not our role, the role of management. Another thing, the amount of time to close the case. Are we closing? If you go measure the investigation team, how quickly are you closing? They say we close it in 1 day. 1 day we collect all the evidence and we close it. So maybe this is not the right approach. But this is what management is saying. They want to evaluate you how fast you close the case. This is not a project. This is not a marketing campaign. The amount of losses recovered. This is an interesting measure. You as an investigation team, how much money you were able to recover from the fraudster. But at the end of the day, this is not in our control. Look, so many of these factors, they are not in our control. Maybe he spent the money. So if he spent the money, now we get low evaluation. But you can have a much better evaluation saying how much money you were able to recover. Based on it, you are doing good job rather than evaluating. Or you were not able to recover so much money, so that's bad. So you need to look at the positive side maybe. Or the percentage of cases resolved in a cycle time goal. Okay, maybe. Case complexity, yes. Did you handle more complex cases? Did you handle more cryptocurrency cases? You handle more cybersecurity? You handle more money laundering cases? Yes. And the compensation of estimated loss to actual losses. So comparison, you compare how much the losses that actually we have compared to the estimates. Yes, maybe that's a measure. Percentage of cases result in disciplinary action. Did we take action against the individuals or not? Again, this is maybe not in our hand. Maybe the legal department decided to take action or they don't want to take action. But these are the ways they measure. The percentage of case complained with investigation standard. Are we compliant with the investigation standard? Are we follow the investigation standard? Or we are doing investigation based on whatever we want? So this is a good measure. This is why always you as an investigator or you as an internal auditor, always we should compare not how many cases you finished, how many cases you did, how fast you did them, how much money you... No. We need to say, when you are handling the case, were you professional? Were you handling the cases in the proper way? Are you doing the proper documentation? So doing your job properly is more important than just saying, oh, how many cases you handled and how many cases you closed and when. Also, the percentage of cases result in legal action. Again, this is not in our hand. If the organization will take legal action or they don't take legal action, at the end of the day, it's up to them. I can determine that. And some organizations, they don't have any performance measure. But this is an interesting way to see how organizations are actually measuring the performance of the investigation team. Another way to look at it is looking at the skills that these individuals, they need to have when they are performing inside the organization. So what type of skills you need to have as a fraud examiner, fraud investigator, or member of the investigation team? They say, what type of skills usually needed for you to operate as an investigation team? So understanding the proper skills that you need to have to be able to perform your job is very critical. Either you can be working in the investigation department or you can be part of the investigation team. Number one, what you need is interviewing. You need to understand how to conduct a proper interview with the suspect, with the witness, with the victim, with the client, to be able to collect the information. Is this information-seeking interview, or this admission-seeking interview, or this is confirmation-seeking interview? How are we going to handle this interview? So understanding that is very critical. This is very important skills that you need to have. Number two is open source intelligence. How are you going to collect the information, not only inside your organization from the database that we have and the files and record, but also externally? What kind of external database you are going to use to collect the information? Are you going to look at social media and understand what kind of information we are going to use from social media to collect this information? So also understanding that is very critical for us when we are operating inside the organization. Number three is data analysis and data mining. Are you, as a person working in the investigation team, utilizing technology and tools to automate your testing, to do your job in a proper way by actually using all these AI solutions? Or you are doing things manually, still using Excel? Also, legal and litigation support. Do you understand exactly how can you reach out to the proper authority for you to get the proper legal support that you need? It can be internally inside the organization from the legal department or externally from the prosecutors. What about forensic accounting? I know so many of you don't like accounting, but this is a very important skill. If you are handling financial record and financial statements, do you have the proper understanding related to the accounting method used in that country, in this organization or not? Also, do you have the proper language? Language today became, because we are operating in a global environment, is very important. Do you understand different languages? When you are conducting an interview with a suspect, are you doing the interview in his language or your language or a third language? It's very critical. What about also the computer and digital forensic knowledge? Today, 80% of our evidence are digital evidence. So do you understand exactly how to collect this digital evidence? how to analyze the digital evidence, and then actually how to present the results. Do you know how to use these tools? So digital forensic today is important. If you don't want to have it, you can hire someone externally to do it. But at least your staff, they need to have the basic knowledge of digital forensic. And finally, cryptocurrency and digital asset tracing. Today, most of fraudsters, they are converting their assets that they steal from your organization to what? To cryptocurrency, digital assets. So how for us as fraud examiners, we need to go and trace these assets to be able to figure out exactly how can we help the organization in recovering them related to the fraud that happened inside the organization. This is exactly what ACFE is teaching in the CFE, in the Certified Fraud Examiner Certificate. We focus on interviewing, understanding the process, figuring out the legal, the accounting. So once you earn a global certificate like the CFE, not only you will have the golden standard in fraud examination as a certificate and badge you can add to your CV and your career, but also you are going to understand all this knowledge that you need to have to be able to perform your job, which is critical for you if you are part of the investigation team. The second thing, which is which investigation task usually you will outsource, which is the opposite, is exactly the opposite. You are going to outsource the areas that you are weak at, which is the cryptocurrency, the computer, the language, the legal, and of course you are not going to outsource other areas which is you are good at, which is the interviewing, the data analytics, and the open source intelligence. So it's very clear exactly which one you are going to have. Look how interesting. But this is what happens in so many organizations. If they are not good in one area, they have two options. They can add a team member that's expert in this area, or they can outsource it. I was doing a training to a very interesting organization. They are working in one industry, and this industry is a more technical industry. They have machines, and they have engines, and they have system. So the head of internal audit, because they are handling areas related to fraud, he told me, I hired an engineer to work in our internal audit team to handle fraud cases. I said, how an engineer is going to handle fraud cases? He said, this engineer, he understands engineering. So he will go with us when we are conducting an audit related to different branches of the organization. And he will understand if any of the guys, the managers, the employees who are working in this branch did anything wrong by looking at the engineering report, by looking at the maintenance, by looking at the factory, the processes, looking at the machines. And in that way, he will provide us the technical expertise that we need for us to understand if what they are telling us correct or not, because we don't have that technical expertise. So sometimes it's important to outsource some of these areas or to hire someone internally inside your team to be able to perform them much better. Very interesting thing is related to understanding for you as investigation team, what you need for you today to operate much better. Two things. This is what most of fraud investigation teams said. We need more staff. Always, I know most of my friends who are working investigation departments, they say, oh my God, we have so many fraud cases, but we don't have staff to handle them. And number two, we need to have technology. We can't use Excel anymore to handle our fraud investigation. So they say most managers in-house fraud investigation team, they said staffing and technology is the most critical thing that we need to do to be able to perform our job. Also, there are other things other than staffing and technology. We need the organizational leadership support. The board of directors, they should support us and make everyone understand that our role is critical in helping the organization in preventing, detecting, and investigating fraud. Also, we need to have the proper training. Training is very important for you working in the fraud domain to understand what are the new schemes, how fraud is happening today in the intelligence age that we are living in. How we need to implement the most advanced fraud investigation technique to analyze the data, to use data analytics. So training is very important. Also, legal compliance support. We need to make sure that the compliance department and the legal department inside the organization are supporting our investigation and our effort. And they are taking the result and taking the proper action after. And sometimes, we need to have external consultant to help us in some areas that we are not expert in. So education and training is very important. Plus having the proper staffing and the proper technical tools to perform our job. Now let's speak about the cases that you have. How many days is usually on average does it take to fill a position for a person inside the organization? Because we have so many cases. If one of these individuals left the organization, how fast can we get someone to go and handle these cases that we have? They say on average, it will take 1 to 30 days, 28% of the time. 31% of the time will take between 31 to 60 days. And around 22% of the time will take around 60 to 90 days. So we can see that it's not easy to actually replace a person working in fraud investigation, unless they are maybe low level. If they are high level, I know one organization, they received the resignation of their head of investigation department. It took them 4 months, which is here approximately like around 120 days, to find someone else. It's not easy to replace someone working in the fraud domain. Number one, because you need to hire a person who you understand that he got the competence, the knowledge, and the certification to do the work. And number two, because there is a massive demand on them. I know most of my friends who are working in this domain, they told me always we get job offers. There is massive demand because the amount of fraud is massive. There is shortage of staff who are they got the experience and knowledge and certifications. So in that way, they always have job offer waiting for them. So this is what, based on that, try as an organization to return, keep your employees, make sure you provide the proper environment for them inside the organization. So in that way, they don't leave, because if they are going to leave, it's going to be costly and time consuming to replace them. Now let's speak about training. Training is a very important area for you as a person working in the fraud investigation team, that you need to have every year, not 1 year, not you khalas, you say I earned the CFE certified fraud examiner and khalas, I'm not going to do training for the rest of my life. They say knowledge is never finished. Learning is a continuous process. So we can see that organizations, they are not allocating massive budget for training related to fraud topic. So the question here, how does average annual training budget per fraud investigator per industry? Are we giving them the proper training or not? They say yes, in energy, oil and gas, I know so many of my friends working there, yes. If you are working in Aramco, if you are working in ADNOC, if you are working on all these oil and gas companies, yes, they are spending so much money on training for their employees. Around, on average a year, around $4,000. We can see other industry also, if they are in the services, if they are in the legal, if they are in government, yes, they are spending some money. So in insurance, in manufacturing, sometimes in banking, yes, they're spending money. But what about the other organization? Why they are not spending money? If they will not give the proper knowledge to the individuals who are working inside the organization to fight fraud, at the end, fraud will happen, or they will not know how to investigate fraud properly, and they will lose millions of dollars. So this is what we call, it's an investment, it's not a cost. If an organization is investing and giving money to the fraud investigation team to advance their knowledge in areas related to fraud investigation, this is going to save the organization hundreds of millions in the future, in helping the organization finish the investigation in the proper way, and helping the organization in making sure that they are going to go and catch fraudsters faster before the fraud is becoming huge, figuring out how they can go and find the evidence, recovering the assets. So knowledge is a key for anyone working in the fraud investigation domain to be able to help the organization. But we can see that actually the training budget is not increasing. I don't know why. Most of my friends who are working in the fraud domain, they tell me this year they didn't allocate training related to fraud issues. Yes, they are giving us soft skills training, leadership, okay. They are giving us training related to communication, but these issues, soft skills, are important. But also for you working in the fraud investigation domain, it's very important to have the proper knowledge to understand how to handle fraud investigation in the proper way, figuring out how to collect the evidence, how to conduct the interview, dealing with the digital evidence, and at the same time understand the legal elements of fraud, understand the recent fraud trends, understanding how can you use AI to make your job much better. So training and knowledge, they are as essential as any other skills that you have inside your organization, because it's going to help you in advancing to the future. So this is, in short, a brief overview of the in-house fraud investigation team's 2025 benchmarking report published by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. I highly recommend you to go and download the report. You can download it in the link below if you are a member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. If If you are not a member, find someone inside your organization who's a member and he can download it and he can share the information with you. But my objective of doing this session is to give you an understanding exactly what's happening in the industry, what's going on with these fraud examiners who are operating in different countries, in different industries, what type of structure they have, how they are being evaluated, what is the workload. And this is really amazing report that ACFE will do on a regular basis to give us an understanding of how can we look at our operation in our industry, in our country, in our department, and see what others are doing and or have an open discussion. Go back after you read the report to your board of directors, to your audit committee, and ask them which area we should improve, what others are doing. Are we much better than them or we are lower than them? Or what skills we need to gain? And based on that, decide what is the plan that we need to have to eliminate the gap between what we should do and what we are currently doing. And at the end, the improvement of the investigation team and the investigation department and the investigation policies and practices inside your organization will reflect positively on the organization in general, in helping the organization handling fraud investigation in the proper way, and at the same time helping you in recovering the assets from the fraudsters, helping you in figuring out how to fix the internal controls that allowed fraud to happen, and at the same time catching fraudsters faster, closing your fraud investigation quickly, and providing the result and the report and collaborating with everyone in the organization in a much better way. Thank you so much for attending the session. I hope that this session added value to you, and please subscribe in my channel to get more of these sessions in the future. Until then, keep fighting fraud and investigating fraud schemes inside your organization with knowledge and intelligence.